This particular yin yoga sequence will contain postures that can oftentimes be challenging for many of us, and there will be minimal cueing of props. Nonetheless, you can use as much padding and support as you need. So even though you might not see me using a lot of support during the practice, this doesn't mean that you can't gather up all the props that you would like to use. So gather up pillows and blankets and books, and if you have regular yoga props like blocks and bolsters, then have them at the ready. You may or may not need them. The sequence includes postures like saddle pose, dragon, frog, sleeping swan, and snail pose. And the story will be a story entitled The Forest Fire. This practice will start with a little bit of breathing and a few warm-up poses before we get into the first yin posture. So find a comfortable seat. I'm going to suggest cross-legged, but if you have a different seat that feels better during the breathing exercises, then try that. Take a while to settle down, find your ground, invite yourself into the present moment. So take some time to notice your environment around you. Notice the temperature of the air around you. Notice the pressure of what you're sitting on here. Notice the little aches and pains that might be in your body. Notice your thoughts. Notice your emotions. Give yourself permission to let it be acceptable. So notice what you're thinking about, to notice how you feel, and let it be okay. Give yourself permission here. And this breathing exercise will be a psychological exercise in that continued effort to give yourself permission to soften. Particularly during this yin practice, if you really want to get through this practice without it feeling frustrating and desperate, then an idea to cultivate is this yoga idea of surrender or letting go. And that's where the breath starts. So go ahead and sit up tall. Bring your spine to a nice neutral spine. You can do that by trying to grow the crown of your head towards the ceiling. And then find a comfortable place for your hands and your arms. Collarbones are wide, shoulders are back, down, soft. Maybe notice the back of your torso with a few gentle breaths here. And then soften your face. If it's okay, close your eyes, release your jaw, and just feel your inhales. Fill up your torso gently, and then gently exhale. And if your nose is not stuffy, and it's okay with your breath, maybe close your mouth and just breathe through your nose here. So we'll add a little bit of psychological mantra to this breathing. Maybe lengthen your breath. Next time you inhale, when you inhale, think about the mantra let go. So as you're inhaling, you'll say quietly to yourself, let go. Let go. And then as you exhale, see if you can actually experience, manifest, and feel what it's like to actually let go. Exhaling is the surrendering breath. It's the in breath. And do this for a few more cycles. So your motto, your mantra, your slogan on the inhale is let go. So as you're inhaling, let go. And then as you exhale, see if you can actually feel yourself doing that, which means you don't have to be spending time saying mantras to yourself. You're actually spending the exhale, feeling the surrender and the letting go of the exhale. So an inhale to a let go, and then exhale. And that's what that feels like, to actually follow along with the mantra. Just a couple more breaths like this. If you don't like the mantra, then drop the mantra. Just notice your normal, natural breath here for maybe one more cycle. And if your eyes are closed, open your eyes. A few kind of yang hatha warm-up poses before we get into the first yin posture. So invite yourself onto your hands and knees. Come into a tabletop position. Make sure this feels stable. So if you're not feeling stable, give yourself permission to rearrange your hands and your knees. Maybe they need to go wider, maybe you need to go farther forward, so you can experiment here. And then once you feel rooted, root through the left hand and the right knee, and then extend the left leg out behind you. Raise it up as to the height of your torso and press back through that left heel. And then maybe slightly tone through your abdomen to stabilize through your whole low back and your hips. And then raise up your right arm and extend it forward. Grow length here. And then just stay here for one more breath. Slowly, gently bring yourself back. And then we'll do the other side. So extend the right leg out. Press the right heel back. Again, the abdomen is slightly toning here. And extend the left arm forward. Grow long here. One more breath here and then bring yourself back. We'll do that all again here, maybe with a little bit of additional posture here. So go back to extending your left leg out long here. Extend the right arm out here and just see if you can hold this. This is not a yin posture. There's muscles engaged here. This is actually a core strengthener here. You can stay here or you can try what's called tiger pose. So for tiger pose, you bend that knee, reach back with the lifted arm, see if you can catch the left foot with the right hand, and then kick the left foot into the right hand, come into a back bend, so belly sinks, and then the hand and the foot lift here, tiger pose. And then go ahead and release, safely bring yourself back to a tabletop position. And then all that on the other side. Extend the right leg out, extend the left arm forward, lengthen here. You can stay here and just enjoy this lengthening. Or you can try tiger pose on this side. Bend the right knee, reach back with the left arm, find the right foot. Extend out here into tiger pose here, just for a moment here. So you're kicking into that hand, drawing it back like a bow, your arm back like a bowstring here. One more breath. And then gently bring yourself back to tabletop here. And then from here, we'll move into our first yin posture. So the first yin posture is saddle pose. Now saddle pose can be pretty intense for some people. And if you're finding that saddle pose is not working for you, there'll be an alternative. The alternative will be seal pose. That doesn't work. Try sphinx pose. So I'll demonstrate saddle pose here first. Saddle pose starts out with sitting back on or in between your heels. Now, if this is already not accessible to you, then you probably want to try Sphinx pose or seal pose. And if you know those poses, you can just start them. Otherwise, I'll demonstrate them when I get done with saddle pose. For me, I sit in between my heels, but you can sit on your heels with your knees wide. I tend to sit in between my heels with knees together, but that's just how I'm personally built and how I prefer to practice the posture here. Second step in saddle pose is to start lowering your torso back, and you go slowly because you're paying attention to how you're feeling and you're moving by feel. So you stop whenever you feel enough pressure, enough stuckness, enough traction somewhere. And then that's your posture. That's where you stay here. So we're finding our edge. I'm finding the edge in this posture. You might need to put props behind you to rest on. Props, maybe you need a few blankets or pillows or a couple of bolsters. Some of you might make it all the way down onto the floor. Your knees can float, but they cannot be in pain. So if you're feeling injury, trauma in the knees or the ankles, that's telling you that maybe you shouldn't be here in saddle here. There can be intensity in the psoas. There can be intensity running down the thighs. That's pretty typical. There can be intensity in the low back and the sacrum. That's characteristic of saddle pose here. So you just see how this feels, and we'll try to stay here for a couple of more minutes, or for as long as you feel like you can maintain this. A minute is actually good. 2 is good. 3 is good, but it's not good if you're injuring yourself here. So an alternative to saddle pose is seal pose. So seal pose, you make your way onto your belly, and then extend your arms on either side of your shoulders, lift your torso up into a very deep back bend. So you lock your elbows off, turn your fingers out wide here. And then see how this feels. Now if this is painful on the back side of the spinal column, come down to Sphinx by bringing your elbows down onto the ground. And then head can hang, or you can lift your head for Sphinx or for seal here. Or you can stay in seal for as long as you want. Notice that my legs are extended, comfortably extended. So if there was any pain in the knees and the ankles in saddle pose, that this should be a posture where those two joints are released here. So that's a viable option here, because saddle is essentially a back bend. It gets into the very low back, the sacrum of the spine, and we're replicating that through the other couple of back bends here. So maybe about 5 more slow breaths here. So the 3 principles of a yin practice are these. The first principle is find your edge. That means move into a posture, find your shape, the one that works for your unique, diverse body here. And that's a place where you are feeling some traction. It can be uncomfortable, but it can't be creating injury here. Second principle is called stillness. Once you've found the shape that sort of works for you, then you basically stay for a while. Create the patience and the fortitude to stay. And finally, time. Time is what does the work, both physically and mentally, emotionally. This is yoga. So we're spending so much time in the postures that it's a mini meditation session. And for a lot of people, the main benefit of yin is the psychological benefit. There are physical benefits going on in pressurizing the connective tissue system of the body too. So just one more breath here. And then gently bring yourself up. Now, the legs were deeply flexed in saddle pose. So you can just take some time doing any kind of gentle motion to work out the stagnation. It can be downward facing dog, which is a yang pose, to extend the legs, to lengthen them out. By the way, if you were in Sphinx or seal pose, you can just bring yourself down, bring yourself back up, come into maybe child's pose for a while. The next posture after saddle pose is dragon pose. Both sides here. So maybe we'll try low flying dragon. So come to hands and knees, come to tabletop, and then bring the left foot forward. In between the hands, inch the right knee back. So this is basic dragon. You might need extra padding under that back leg. You might need books or blocks underneath your hands to feel stable. You might have to rearrange this front leg here. So this is basic dragon. See if this is a good stopping point. You can stay here, or you can come into low flying dragon by moving this left foot out to the left a few inches. Bring the left arm on the inside and either stay up on straight arms, come down onto blocks, or come all the way down onto your forearms here. And then we'll stay here for a few minutes. Here in low flying dragon, notice your breath. Use your breath to help you let go. So if you're feeling that discomfort, that strain of the posture, first notice if it's injurious, and then that's a red flag for you to come out. But if it's not feeling injurious, if it's just feeling uncomfortable, This is where you invoke the yoga practice. Find the patience. Notice where the strain is. Breathe into it. Maybe say, let go on the inhale, and then see if you can actually soften the sharp edges on the exhale here. And then you can let your head hang, you can hold your head up, you can get a prop to rest your head on. Maybe you need to back off, maybe you need to come out. You can even stay longer. This is a video, so you can always just stop the video or let the video run and stay 5 minutes in these postures. Generally, we're staying 3 to 4 minutes in these postures. But we will stay here, unless it is painful, and then you give yourself permission to come out and to rest and to do something else. So once at dawn, fairly early in the morning, there were two tigers that were resting on the edge of the savannah next to a vast forest. The forest was their home, but they had gotten up before dawn to go and do some practice hunting on the savannah. Two male tigers. One was a very old, mature tiger, and the other tiger was a small tiger cub, the son. So a father and son, the father, the old, mature tiger who is kind of teaching some pointers to his son, and they were done with the morning practice, the morning hunt, and they were just simply resting on the edge of the forest here. As they were resting, the son, the small cub, looked up and looked at the forest, their home, where they normally live, and he noticed some smoke coming from the trees, and he asked his dad about it, and his dad looked up, and his dad looked in horror at the scene, because what he and what the cub both were realizing is that the forest was on fire. The smoke rising from the trees, and the more they looked at it, the more smoke appeared, and they could even see the small flames licking up from the tops of the trees, the orange heat from the fire. Their home was on fire. One more breath here, and if you're on fire here, you can slowly begin to come out of dragon. So plant both of your hands, bring yourself up into normal dragon if you're in low flying dragon. Maybe bring that foot back. And then from here, plant both of your hands. Maybe tuck the back toe. Reach your hips back and extend the front leg. So this is half monkey pose. This is one kind of a counter pose that you can do after dragon pose to lengthen out through the back of this hamstring. You can stay here for a moment or two, and then at some point bring yourself up. You can also do downward facing dog, or you can do some cat and cows. But we have the other side of dragon to do. So we might as well get to it. When you're ready, bring the right foot in front, inch the left knee back. Set yourself up for your dragon here. So again, you might need some props. Maybe you need padding. Maybe you need to rearrange this front leg to get around some compression here. Maybe good old regular dragon is just fine. Or maybe come into low flying dragon. So bring the left arm around inside, or right arm inside the right foot. Stay here on straight arms, or come down onto forearms here. And then from here, in low flying dragon, see if you can find some stillness and stay here. As the two tigers continued to watch the forest fire in great fear, the small tiger cub, he realized that some of his family is still in there. He looked to his dad with great concern. He said, "Mom is still in there. My sister is still in there somewhere." And the great male tiger said, "Yes, I know, son." But he says, "It's too dangerous to go in there right now. Forest fires Forest fires can be dangerous and deadly. I don't know what we're going to do. I've never seen anything like this devastating before. And as they continued to watch the forest fire, they began to notice something far off in the distance, in the smoke and in the flames, something flying slightly above the forest fire. And as they continued to watch, they saw it rise above the smoke, and its wings became clear. And what the father realized, it was a dragon flying above the forest. And the father's fear, when it saw the dragon, turned from fear, and he turned it into anger and into rage. And then he looked at his son and he snarled when he spoke to his son. He says, "There, son, do you see that? Can you see the dragon? She's responsible for the forest fire. Everyone knows that dragons breathe fire and that she started the fire. We can only hope that the damage is minimized because dragons do great damage and great evil." And as they continued to watch the dragon soaring above, all of a sudden the dragon looked down with its long snaky neck into the forest. It saw something, and then it dove into the forest, which really alarmed the two tigers. And it's like, "Oh no," the father exclaimed. She's probably diving into the forest to catch some poor, undeserving creature." And this continued to alarm the small tiger. After a minute or so, they saw the dragon rise again out of the flames and out of the clouds. So just one more breath here on this side of dragon. And then slowly bring yourself up. If you were a low-flying dragon, maybe come back into regular dragon. You can do the same counter pose on this side. You can reach back with your hips, extend the front leg forward into a half monkey pose, just to relieve the pressure off of the front leg here. You can stay here, or you can try downward facing dog. You can do child's pose here, just to work out the kinks or so. And then bring yourself down. The next posture will be frog pose. The alternative to frog pose is a wide-legged child's pose here. So frog pose usually creates a lot of pressure under one's knees and ankles. So you might use a little bit of extra padding for frog pose. And again, if frog pose is a little bit too intense, you can always just try wide-legged child's pose. Maybe I'll show child's pose here first. So knees are pretty wide. You set your hips back as far as they go until they stop. And then you rest your torso forward, arms extended forward. And you can have as much padding underneath your torso or your hips as you want to. So you can reach for some pillows or some extra blankets. Maybe you need extra padding under here. If you're coming into full frog pose, then the idea here is this is a direct hip opener. So knees come out wide, and then you move your shins apart until they become parallel to each other here. And theoretically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to line up the hips with the knees to make this as intense as possible, but not injurious here. If it's too intense, then you keep your hips behind or in front of your knees, depending on how much pressure you're feeling here. And if there's too much pressure on the knees and the ankles, put more padding underneath here. And then from here, you maybe bring yourself down onto your forearms, or maybe onto a bolster, or a pile of pillows, or a couch cushion. And then you stay here, and if this is too intense, maybe wide-legged child's pose, a good option here for a while. Otherwise, we'll stay here for a couple more minutes or so. Head can be up, head can hang, head can be on a prop here. Again, these are all kind of options. Feet can be out farther, feet can be in closer. So the details, not that important. The important thing is do you feel something through the hips? For most of us, we do in this posture here. Come back to your breath. Maybe come back to this mantra of let go here to see if you can find a state of patience with the traction here. As the two tigers continue to watch the scene in terror and in anger and rage, at some point, the dragon notices them, and the dragon begins to slowly fly over to where they're at. And they watch, they notice the dragon is coming, and the father, filled with rage, filled with anger for all of this uncertainty, all of this chaos, all of this unknown that he's witnessing, he decides he's going to act, and he looks down at the cub and he says, this dragon is coming over. If she comes over to us, he says, we must attack her. She is responsible for all of this horror that's going on in our lives. We must attack her. That is the right thing to do. So we must get ready if she does come, because we must attack. And as she gets closer, she gets bigger. And she continues to get bigger. And she continues to get larger as she flies closer. Larger and larger she gets. In fact, they realize that the dragon is as big as an elephant. She has this long neck with black, shiny scales, these huge, leathery wings, and 4 paws filled with razor-sharp, foot-long claws. Giant dagger-like teeth come out of the sides of her jaws, and her eyes are these deep, deep green pools. And as she approaches them, she begins to land, and her wings start to whip up wind and dust, and eventually her hind feet, her tail land on the ground, and slowly she begins to fold her wings in on either side, taking a fair look at both of the tigers here. One more breath here in frog pose. And then slowly bring yourself out of frog pose. Now, if you're in wide-legged child's pose, you can probably just sit up and work your way out. If you've been in full frog for this whole time, it might be easier to just move your torso forward onto your belly and then bring your legs in slowly together. One counter pose you can try is bend both knees and just start to rock your shins and your ankles slowly back and forth to relieve the pressure on your knees and on your hip points here. And then slowly bring yourself up. And then from here, the next yin posture will be sleeping swan pose. So if you need extra padding, you can always just leave this right here. Otherwise, move the padding off to the side. Maybe you need to have some padding at the ready for sleeping swan. From here, come onto hands and knees again. Bring the left foot forward, just like we did for dragon. So left foot is forward, inch the right knee back. And then move that left foot over to the right side and lower the left knee slowly. As you're doing so, notice if there's any pain in the left knee. This is meant to be a hip opener. So if this knee is feeling too much pain, bring this heel in closer to the hip. And as the hips lower, at some point they might stop before they make it to the ground. If that's creating too much pressure, that means you need to put enough padding underneath this to support the hips. So sometimes we're really high up off the ground. But if this is all feeling okay, then let your hips sink here. We can start off in swan pose. Swan pose is where we lift the torso into a light back bend here. just to lengthen out through the front of the spinal column. And then slowly, with attention, lower yourself just as far as you go until you're feeling enough pressure, enough traction here. If you're feeling too much, you back yourself off. If you're not feeling enough yet, you keep going. Maybe you can go all the way to the ground. Maybe you would really like a pillow here to lay on. Then get a pillow here. So find your version of sleeping swan, and then we'll stay here for a few more minutes here on this side of sleeping swan. Again, you can be all the way out here onto the floor here. Most of us are feeling enough on our forearms here, in the hip. Remember, this is supposed to be in the hip, so if the bent knee or the ankle is having an issue, then maybe elevate your hips until those joints are in an okay space here. The dragon was sitting directly in front of the two tigers, staring at them. And it was at that time that the larger male tiger decided to strike. He decided to attack. So he gathered all of his effort, all of his anger, and he closed his eyes to reach back into a pouncing position. And he was getting ready to spring with all of his energy at the dragon. And just as he was getting ready, he closed his eyes for a moment. And as his eyes were closed, he began to feel this very small but very painful prick right in between the center of his eyes. And so he opened his eyes, and he noticed that the dragon had reached her front paw forward and taken her claw and placed it, that giant claw, right in between the center of his eyes. And she was gazing at him with a not so pleasant expression, and she let out a low rumble. And when the father tiger felt the pain of that claw in between his eyes and heard the low rumble of the dragon, he began to have second thoughts about his attack, about his pounce. And he softened, and he surrendered, and he backed off. The dragon slowly put down her front paw. Unbeknownst to the two tigers, her other front hand, other front foot, was actually clutching something, her huge other front paw. And she turned her gaze from the older tiger to her front paw, and she began to open up her front foot. And there in her front foot was a small female tiger cub, who woke up, came bounding out, and she ran over to her brother, the sister of the small cub. Just one more breath here on this side. When you're ready to come out, maybe come back into swan. So use your hands and your arms. Use the muscles in your arms to lift your torso up first. Come back into this just gentle back bend. And then slowly make your way out however you would like to. It can be downward facing dog. If you're used to that in vinyasa yoga classes, it can be table, cat and cow. Maybe you want to rest back in child's pose. A few breaths here, this counter pose time, even just like sitting and resting here. Otherwise, we're getting ready for the other side of sleeping swan here. When you are ready, you'll come back to table. It's the other foot. It's the right foot that comes up. It's the left foot back. And then move that right foot over to the left side. Lower the right knee. Adjust the shin, the front ankle. Maybe decide if you need padding on this side. Maybe you'll realize that maybe one side is different than the other. That's not unusual for us humans, where most of us are inherently asymmetrical. Maybe start out with swan here, and then slowly come into your version of sleeping swan. Take your time. Again, you're moving by feel, not by what these postures actually look like here. And then from here, settle down into this other side, this second side of swan pose here. The dragon sat there, just kind of looking at this family of 3 tigers. And the small female tiger, the sister, she begins to excitingly tell her father and her brother what had happened. She said, yeah, the dragon found me. She said, I got lost, I got separated from mom, I don't know where she is. But she says, luckily, this dragon spotted me from above and she saved me from the forest fire. And I told her that you were on the edge of the forest, you were on the savannah. And so she brought me here to you. And as she was telling this to the 2 tigers, the dragon turned away. She unfolded her mighty wings and then she took off and she began to lift and go back to the forest fire. The young male tiger cub, he asked his sister, well, where is she going now? And the sister replied, well, she has a young son and she lost him in the forest fire. She doesn't know where he is. That's who she was searching for when she found me. So I told her about mom. And she told me that if she finds mom, she will help mom as she continues to look for her son. She doesn't know who started the forest fire. She didn't start it. She doesn't know who did. But she's going back. She's going back to look for her son. So we have about 5 more breaths on this side of sleeping swan. It's 5 long, slow yoga breaths. So maybe come back to this mantra of letting go. Notice where the sensations are, and they might not always be in the hip. They might actually be in our mind, and that's where we send the breath. The breath is sent to where the most sensation is being experienced at the moment here. It's being felt. One more breath here. And then when you're ready, slowly make your way back up to swan. Again, use your hands and your arms to do the work here of slowly lifting your torso up just as far as it goes until it starts feeling resistance. And then see what you need to do to slowly work yourself the rest of the way out of sleeping swan. And take your time, rest, or do a little bit of yang or hatha work here to wake up the muscle fiber. The next posture in the yin sequence is a posture known as snail pose. Again, snail pose is not really accessible for everyone. It can be a challenging posture. Snail pose is a forward fold, and so there'll be an alternative to snail pose. I'm going to lay out a little bit of padding for myself here. So for snail pose, you basically make your way onto your back. And you're going to end up on kind of your head, neck, shoulder, upper torso area. So this can be a little bit intense for the neck here. So if you have a sensitive neck, probably snail pose is not for you. The alternative will be butterfly, and I'll demonstrate butterfly here in a moment. But first, this is what snail looks like. You start out on the ground. By the way, snail is the yin cousin to plow pose in other hatha yoga practices here. From here, maybe extend your arms, palms face down. You're using your hands and your arms for stability here. Neck is long, chin is slightly tucked here. And I've got extra padding underneath my upper torso and my shoulders. You can have padding even underneath your head if you need to here. And then you extend your legs and your torso up and over here into this kind of curled up position. So this is a forward bend, and it's a very intense forward bend here. Feet might make it to the ground. Maybe they float. Knees can be straight. Knees can be bent to relax the muscle fiber in the legs here. So you just go until you stop. Maybe you can tuck the shoulder blades underneath your torso so that your upper spine isn't pressing, or your neck isn't pressing into the ground. Once you get settled here, you probably won't move your head around. And then this is where you will stay here. So this is snail. And you can stay here for as long as you want to. If you're finding that to be just way too painful, then probably not a good idea. You can try butterfly. So for butterfly, put your feet together. Knees bent out wide. Just kind of comfortable seat. Heels don't have to be in close. So this is butterfly legs. And then forward fold. So grow up tall through your torso initially, and then relax and round your torso. Come into whatever forward fold, however far you go. You can use props, put underneath your torso or your head here. But you're just going to stay here for as long as you need to. You can also put padding underneath your knees here. Come back to your breath here. Otherwise, if you're finding snail to be accessible for you, or maybe you're already done with snail and you're wanting something else to do, you can come and just finish with butterfly. Otherwise, we'll stay here. Stay here in snail for about another minute or so. So just notice how this feels. Now in yoga, it's really nice to be able to breathe. So if this kind of cuts off your trachea, it'll be really hard to practice the yoga here if you're in here and you can't actually breathe here. But if you can breathe, and this is not creating harm or injury, but it is just very intense here, then see if you can stay here for maybe 5 more breaths or so. And then when you're ready, slowly unfurl yourself from snail. You can take your time here. You have all the time in the world. So this doesn't have to be a dramatic, quick unfolding. You can slowly bring yourself all the way back out. Maybe you just want to lie on your back here for a moment. In fact, you can do some little bit of integration. That was the last long, intense yin posture. So a couple of integrative postures before we move into shavasana here, the resting pose. So you can stay on your back if you're already there. I'm just clearing my mat of props here. Bend both knees. Start out with bringing the right knee into your torso. Give the right knee a nice hug, and then extend the right leg up towards the ceiling. Clasp behind your right thigh. Bring that right foot in. Kind of really press the right heel up towards the ceiling. The leg doesn't have to be straight, but you're feeling a little bit of oomph behind the leg here. Extend the left leg long. Maybe just one more breath here. And then bend the right knee, put the right foot either on the floor or on the left thigh, and then come into a twist. So sweep that right knee across the left leg over to the left side. Right arm comes out into an outrigger position so that that right shoulder settles back to the ground so that your torso's in a twist here. If it's okay with your head and your neck, maybe turn your head to the right. Maybe your neck has had enough after snail pose, so maybe you want to keep your head neutral. And then you can use your left hand to create a little bit more pressure on that right thigh here. Just one more breath here. And then bring that right knee back up, put the right foot back on the ground. Left foot meets the ground, left knee is bent, and then draw the left knee in. Give the left knee a hug. Extend the left leg straight, so left heel pushes up towards the ceiling. Maybe pull the left leg gently in with your hands. Extend the right leg out, and then stay here for a breath or two. Then bend the left knee. Sweep the left knee across the right leg. Come into a spinal twist on the other side. Head and neck can remain neutral. Left arm extends out to the side, or you can turn your head and your neck to look down that left arm here. And then just a couple of breaths here. Bring everything back up. Bend both knees, draw them in, maybe give them one final hug. If there's any final movements before your final resting posture, just to work out kinks or imbalances, then do those. And then come into your final resting posture. For this practice, I'm going to suggest legs up the wall pose, but you can just lie on the ground in traditional Shavasana. You can sit in a quiet meditative posture. Otherwise, if you want to try legs up the wall, make your way over to some wall space. You can have some height underneath your hips or not. I've got a bolster here that I'm going to use, but you can actually just use a blanket or nothing at all here. Sit sideways by the wall and then bring your legs up the wall. This might take a few tries. Try to get your hips as close to the wall as possible here. As you make your way, find a legs up the wall position that kind of works for you here. And then arms are extended. Head and neck are comfortable. So if your head and neck are not comfortable, grab some props. Grab a pillow here. And then maybe point and flex the feet a few times. Find something that feels stable, safe, supported, and then this is where you soften. So soften your face, release your jaw, relax your tongue. Soften the whole entire inside of your mouth. Everything is soft. Let go of your gums, your teeth. Soften the insides of your right cheek and your left cheek. Release the skin around your lips, your nose, your chin. Soften the skin around each ear. Release your eye sockets. So soften the muscle around your left eye. Soften the muscle fiber around your right eye. Release the tension in between your eyes. Soften your forehead, soften your temples. Release the crown of your head. Soften your thoughts. Let them drift in, but also let them drift out. Have nowhere to go. Have nothing to do. For the next few minutes, have no agenda. Your only agenda, your only task right now is to simply exist. It can be helpful to postpone being a human doing. Give yourself the power, the permission to be a human being. And just notice. Just pay attention to what it feels like to exist and to breathe. Soften down through the rest of your body. So relax your rib cage and your torso. Soften both arms, right arm, right palm, right fingers, left arm, left palm, and left fingers. See if you can notice the tips of each of your fingers. You can notice this by noticing that sense of energy, tingling in the tip of each of the fingers, both hands, left and right. Continue this idea of softening, this idea of surrender, letting go, down through the low back, down through the hips, and the thighs, the knees, the shins, ankles, bottoms and tops of the feet. Soften each toe on both feet and see if you can notice that light sense of energy, that prana, life force, in the tip of each toe on both feet. Release, relax, and surrender your body-mind 100%. And visualize yourself walking through the remains of a forest that has completely burned down. It's an empty landscape of ash and dust. On the surface it looks very desolate, but as you look closer, you notice that there's small green plants breaking their way through the ash and the dirt and the mud. Small flowers, small grass, small trees, beginning their lives in the ash of a mighty forest fire, starting over again after a great surrender, after a great letting go. When you're ready, you can begin to deepen your breath. Make little movements with fingers and with toes. Expand that motion into wrists and into ankles. Make little motions with arms, with legs. If you're in legs up the wall, gently bend your knees. Place your feet on the wall and maybe push yourself away from the wall and very gently roll over onto one side. When you get there, stay there for a moment and allow yourself to cultivate a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for you, your practice. Gratitude for your unique embodiment in this universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you feel ready, slowly, gently bring yourself up into a comfortable seat. Take some time, find a place that feels grounded, rooted, stable. Grow your spine nice and tall, maybe shoulders are up and back to create space to breathe. And then bring your hands together in front of heart center. I'll end practice with one Om. You can either join in or just listen to my voice. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.